Welcome to Find Your Tribe podcast. We're broadcasting from beautiful Portland, Oregon. My name is Annie Lavender Weller. I'm a member of the Turtle Mountain Band, the Chippewa Indians, and co-founder of the Leadership Lab, which is a career, academic, and transitional coaching nonprofit. I'm also a serial entrepreneur, author, and International Coaching Federation, ACC certified business coach and consultant. Welcome to my podcast, Find Your Tribe. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Find Your Tribe. If you hear a dog panting in the background, that's just little Boo-Boo. It's been really hot here in Portland the last few days, so I have all the windows open in our house, so I apologize for the noise. But this is part 2 of my interview with Lou Fredrick. Please enjoy, and please remember to review and subscribe.
This is the thing that I think we need to recognize. Let's talk. We go back to something. The first question, your tribe. Part of the issue we have right now is that we have such a broad. The scale is so large. At one time, we would have known 150 to 200 people at the most.
Yeah, exactly.
And they would have been in a small area, and you would have known what so-and-so did for not only for a living, but what their interest was, and we don't have that anymore, and we need to we can't go back to it, but we need to replicate it in some way.
I think social media is a double-edged sword, where it has expanded our reach and has helped us be able to keep in contact and also know people across the world. But I feel that face-to-face contact is more important than keeping up with your social media. That's why I say it's a double-edged sword, because you are keeping in contact. But us sitting here face-to-face talking and looking each other's eyes and our body language, and
right.
I think that's super important. And it's something, it's a kind of it's being lost somehow.
Well, it is being lost. Although I think people wanted to try to substitute that for other things. And so you get the social media, you get the emails, you get the instant, the various programs applications that get you talking with folks and seeing people. But you do need to have that balance, that personal, face-to-face kind of conversation, which is a struggle because we don't know what that means, what that loss is. So, I always say this: steal this idea. I had for many years, I had fifth graders come over to my house for an hour and a half once a week. So I would have 12 fifth graders from Irvington Elementary School coming to my house for 4 weeks, and they would sit there, and I would have 2 men, 2 women, a scientist, an artist, an entrepreneur, and a social service person. Those were the 4 folks, adults, that they would come and they would hear individually. They didn't all come together about what it was like to be an adult. And they sit in my living room rather than in a classroom where there was, career day, whatever. Sit in the living room. The fifth graders inhaled popcorn because that's what they do. We would have juice, and they would talk. And sometimes the adults would talk about their careers, but many times they would talk about other things. One of my favorites was a friend of mine who's an architect, and he showed the kids some of his drawings. The first 10, 15 minutes of the time he was there, he said, "Now this is what I do. I draw this." And he said, "The reason I'm able to do this is because I do this now. It takes me only a short period of time, can make some money doing that, so that then I can go fly fishing." And he brought out his flies and his book on flies and how you draw, how you tie them, and where you go fishing, and and we had that night we usually had 6 boys and 6 girls, but I think we had 8 girls and 4 boys. None of the kids in that group had ever been fishing, and a number of them had never been to a stream, really to a river. They'd seen it as they drove over it, but they'd never really been down. So they were fascinated. The girls that night, though, were hilarious because as they left, as they were talking, they said, you mean that if I could take a piece of string and a little bit of feather and a bead, I can fool a fish into believing it's a fly? That is amazing. And so they just soaked up all of this idea of understanding what a fly does and how it affects a fish. They thought that was just one of the best things. If you'd shown them a book of insects before that, they would have many of them would have gone, ugh, don't like that, because that's the stereotype. No, that wasn't what took place. These young ladies were ready to look at this kind of thing in a very different fashion. So they had a broader perspective. And that's what you want to. That's what I think we want to see. We want to see kids have a broad perspective.
It's an interesting point that you brought up, because the Leadership Lab, the nonprofit that I co-founded and run with my sister, we are really trying to bridge that gap with the youth, the urban youth, with the rural youth, especially with Native Americans, since we're Native American. And we have not had a real hard time with the youth bridging. We're having a really hard time with the adults allowing.
Yeah. That doesn't surprise me.
As a Native American, I grew up in an urban environment. I don't know about my culture. Also, my great-grandparents moved over from North Dakota, from the reservation, to get their citizenship, number one, and number two, to get jobs because they were relocated. So I'm a third-generation Oregonian. I'm very proud of that. I'm very proud that my grandparents and my great-grandparents worked down in the shipyards and were welders, and there was a lot of minorities that were Rosie the Riveters. They weren't just like these beautiful white women. It was mostly minorities down there. I don't think a lot of people realize that. I'm very proud of that history. But how are you, now that you're a senator, how are you trying to build that gap, I guess, between the urban and the rural? Because I know that we have a really huge disconnect, especially here in Oregon. Huge.
Well, first of all, I should tell you that my father was an electrical draftsman for the Liberty ships in Vancouver. Something I did not know about until about 2 weeks before I moved out here. He had told me that he had told me a lot about that, but I had never heard it before. And so now he tells me a lot about his time there. The urban-rural divide is huge, not just in Oregon, but it's definitely huge in Oregon. And that's been part of my mission, if you will. I'm the chair of the Natural Resources Committee for the Ways and Means Committee for the state. And part of the reason that I wanted that is because of a conversation I had with former Governor Tom McCall back in the late 70s, early 80s. Just before he died, a few years before he died. And he was telling me that he was concerned because he looked and saw that most of the people in Portland no longer had relatives in the rest of the state. So in the past, when they had Thanksgiving, Uncle George, who was a logger, or Aunt Martha, who worked on a wheat farm, had a connection. You'd have Thanksgiving. You could talk about those things, and people understood those things. But now, at a certain point, he said we no longer have that connection. Well, it's even worse now. And people, I've literally had to tell a couple of my constituents that the rest of the state is not a park. One person started complaining to me because they were in a convertible and they had driven on the other side. They were on the other side of the mountains. They were heading for Bend, and there was a combine that was moving along, and it was kicking up a lot of dust. And they were just upset because they got all this dust all over them, and they were in the convertible. Why didn't they wait until folks stopped driving through before they did any of that kind of farming? I went, what?
I'm sorry. I'm just trying to hold my laughter.
Yeah, no, you laugh. I looked at him. I said, "You are kidding me, right? This is not real. You're making this up." No, I just don't understand. Well, you got to do something about changing that. I said, well, "No, I'm not."
I'm glad that you said that.
That's not going to happen that way. But we do have this kind of a disconnect. We also have a disconnect with the rural community understanding what goes on in Oregon, in Portland.
I feel like we're in a bubble. here. I tell my sister, who's 11 years younger than me, we have kind of a bubble, and we have this protection around us. I'm very lucky because my husband's in the Oregon National Guard. So every 2 years or so forth, he's moved. So we've been at Camp Rylea at the Oregon coast. He was just in Albany. He goes out to Pendleton, Umatilla. So I've been very lucky also that I get to go out and I get to meet the people, because usually only the commanders change, and they're from all over. But the privates and the sergeants and so forth are usually from the area. So I get to hang out with the people from the area and really get to know their perspective. The only place I've ever had racism, I'll be honest with you, was in Dallas, Oregon.
Dallas, Oregon, no?
Yeah.
Oh, that's too bad.
Not the Dallas, but Dallas, Oregon.
Right. I know Dallas.
Yeah, so that was the only time I ever felt uncomfortable, I'll just be honest with you, which is very interesting. But I noticed how people even treat people from Portland. Like we are just this, I don't want to say a disease, but and part of that is the fact that we no longer have a media that really covers the rest of the state. We have OPB is the only real media that goes around the state. The rest of the folks are very hesitant to go out unless there's a disaster somewhere. Then they'll show up, and that's it. When I was a reporter, we would do all sorts of. I did some silly stories, and I did some sort of personal interest kinds of story. 5-part series on Burns. And what was going on. It was an economic disaster, but we did 5 parts on it. We didn't just go over and do a quick thing and fly back on the helicopter. So I've been to all 36 counties in the state. So I feel very comfortable generally going to those places and seeing what's going on. But we do not have that kind of an interaction. And so the only time that the folks outside of Portland, and frankly some of the folks in Portland, see any information about what's going on in Portland. It's a disaster. It's a shooting. It's a massive fire. There's anarchy in the streets. Right.
There's a demonstration and anarchy. You're right.
And we're just destroying downtown Portland.
Right. Exactly. So that's the only. I mean, I've had to say to a couple of folks that no, you don't need to be packing when you come into the city of Portland. That's just silliness. But they believe, because that's the only thing that they see. And when we get out to folks from Portland either get out and they're naive about what's going on in the rest of the state. They think that everyone's going to be attacking them, and they're really suspicious, and they're worried about people looking at them the wrong way or something like that. And the folks may not be looking at them the wrong way; they're just looking at them, going, "Who are these people?"
Yeah.
But that's normal. But we don't have that kind of an interaction, and that's one of the struggles that I think we still need to have. And we're not going to get a new media that's going to do that. That's part of the problem there too. I mean, the broadcast media, was in it for 17 years. They're not going to be going back out to the.
It's about money and ratings.
Well, it's about debt. It's about debt. The broadcast stations have been bought by companies that are expecting to make a certain amount of money each time, and if they're making money, but they're not making as much as they'd like, so they're going to cut back on the number of people reporting. They're going to cut back on the number of anchors, the number of producers. The fact checkers have gone. Mm-hmm. They do not exist for the most part in terms of broadcast. So you have all these kinds of things taking place, and people and no concept. I mean, one of the things that was very disturbing for me is in the Capitol. There was a time when there was a reporter and a photographer for each television station based in the basement of the Capitol every day.
I remember because I did PR for 10 years.
And
yep.
Every day they would do that. They would be there and they would cover what was going on, and so they got to know the personalities, the players, how certain things moved through the House and the Senate, how the governor was dealing with issues, so they could bring that kind of content to the general public and context to the general public. That's not the case anymore. They helicopter in when the Oregonian comes up with a particular issue that they think they can do visually, and then then if there's anybody who decides to act out in some form or become loud or attack, that's what they cover. So if you watch the general media on things, the only time you hear about something taking place is when you had this major conflict taking place. Well, if you look at the kinds of the number of bills that are passed and the kinds of bills that are passed, both with bipartisan support, it's huge. There are some controversial issues. They're supposed to be controversial issues, but they aren't knockdown, drag out kinds of things.
Sideshows.
They aren't as insane as what we're seeing back in Washington D.C. or in other states, for that matter. We have people who really want to work together. They'll disagree on philosophical issues, but they don't condemn each other in one form or another. If somebody does condemn something, then that's going to be on that's going to be part of the news cycle. But generally, that's not the case.
I'm just curious: is there some sort of like C-SPAN for Oregon? Well,
it's not so much a C-SPAN. The thing that we do have in Oregon that is a little different than other places is OLIS, O-L-I-S, the Oregon Legislative Information Service, and system. I think it's system, but it's O-L-I-S. If you Google that, you'll find the bills that are introduced, the committee meetings that take place, even the interim committee meetings, they're going to be live, and you can watch what goes on there. And so you have it live, and then you can go back and get information about every bill and every amendment to the bill that's been introduced, and where they went and how they passed, what they didn't pass. You can look at all the testimony, all the written testimony, as well as the verbal testimony on each bill as well. So you have that kind of thing. And so it's not like a C-SPAN where you have some sort of interviews that take place, but you do have that kind of thing take place.
I'm a C-SPAN nerd.
Okay, all right.
But I do appreciate that Senator Merkley and Senator Wyden, that they do have their live Facebook feeds when they're in Washington, D.C., or they're doing something important. I really appreciate that, because then I can see really what my senators are doing for me. But I do get the emails, the newsletters on bills that I'm interested in. So Means and Ways and veterans and some other things that I'm very interested in. But even for me, that has been a little difficult to navigate.
Well, it is
as a civilian.
Yeah, it is difficult to navigate, and if you're not directly involved with it. I mean, Earl Blumenauer is tweeting all the time. There's usually something from Peter DeFazio and Suzanne Bonamici as well. Don't get a lot from Kurt Schrader, but I'm sure that he has something going on.
I don't get anything from him.
I get some things from him, but not a lot.
I do get your newsletter. I appreciate that.
Great, thank you. Well,
even though I'm not in your district, I still.
Great.
Well, no, I look at everybody's district that affects me and affects my business. It's just something that I feel that's very important.
Well, you have that kind of thing taking place, and you have regular town halls or meetings. I have the second Saturday of every month. I have a meeting in the Broadway Grill, which is fun. It starts at 9, goes, and you're supposed to go until 10. People end up talking until 11, but we end up a good conversation. 15 to 30 people, depending on what's going on that particular month. And we didn't have it last month because I was out of town right after the session ended. So we weren't able to do it. But it's that kind of interaction that takes place. And C-SPAN, we don't have a real C-SPAN kind of thing, but we do have really transparent efforts. All the committee meetings that take place, if you end up with a quorum of folks there, then they are going to be you're going to have the meeting taped and visualized.
And also, you can go down.
Yep.
And you can be in the audience. You can listen.
Right.
And if you want to, you can testify.
Right.
If you're very passionate about something, I've testified for a few things.
Have you? Good.
I have. It was the first time was very nerve-wracking, but then I was just like, oh, I know these people.
Well, that's
another thing. I know these people because they're business leaders like you and I.
Well, the thing, my wife doesn't go grocery shopping with me because I'm going to be stopped at least once, usually 4 times, in Fred Meyer or Safeway or New Seasons. That's a guarantee. So there's an ability to talk with different people. That's different than you have in other parts of the country. Again, that sense of hope that brought me out here continues to hold me here because I see people trying to make things better. That's been my job. My job is to make things better for the people who come after me. I was told that by my folks. I was told that by my neighbors. I was told that by some icons. My playmates when I was in elementary school, middle school, were Marty, Yolanda, and Dexter King. So Dr. King would tell me that's what he expected was for us to make things better for the people who come after you.
So how can people get involved? I mean, what are you? One of the things that I really want to talk about is what are you involved with at the next session that's coming up? Really, what's happening? I mean, I have so many questions.
Well,
I do. We could talk for another hour, but I need to be conscious of time.
Well, there are a lot.
Can you condense that in like 2 minutes?
2 minutes. Well,
no, I'm just teasing.
No, seriously. The key there is to know who are your elected officials are. In Multnomah County, there are 250 people who are elected. 250 elected officials here. So you have not only city council and school boards and county commissioners, but you have soil and water district folks, and you have state legislators and state senators and obviously U.S. congressmen and U.S. senators and governors and secretary of states and folks like that. All of those folks you should at least get a sense of who's there. And it is easy, really pretty easy to get in touch with all of those people. It's not a hidden situation, and you don't have to come up with money to talk with them. When I was in Boston once back in the mid-'80s for a year at MIT, I went around and I was watching the election, and I asked to meet with an assemblyman, and his aide said, "Well, have you got $20,000?" And I said, "No." He said, "Well, that would guarantee you a chance to talk with him." I went, "Well, that's not the case in Oregon, and it's certainly not the case now." So you recognize that you actually have the ability. So there are town halls. Every legislator that I know has a town hall, usually monthly, sometimes bi-monthly. And there's always access on email and other ways to get in touch with people. You can get overwhelmed by some things, and I'm not getting back to everybody as quickly as I'd like, but generally try to do that. But you have the ability to access all sorts of folks in Oregon in a way that is relatively easy. It's not, and people will listen. Now, because they listen doesn't mean they're going to agree and do everything you want them to do. But it does mean that you get a chance to at least give your opinion on what you think should happen.
Is this that saying the squeaky wheel?
The squeaky wheel is part of it, but it's also...
Does it still get... I mean,
yeah,
if you keep on oiling it, is it going to...
Well, the key for Oregon, in my view, is not so much the squeaky wheel as it is no elected official can say they've never heard that issue brought up. They may disagree with you on that, and I get disagreements. There are a number of things that I end up having folks disagreeing with me on, but I recognize that that's part of the process. This is not a mythical land where you say something and then everybody goes, "Well, of course we'll follow exactly what you want us to do." That's not the way it works. You do have to work with other people in terms of compromises and persuading them to allow people to work on things. We have to work together, and that's I think that's more the case in Oregon than you'll find in other parts of the country, because we've decided that that's okay. And that even breaks through the urban-rural divide. We have transportation issues. The transportation issues are not just what happens in terms of the roads in Eastern Oregon, but also how the roads in I-5, because my district happens to be the center of transportation in the state. It's I-5, 205, it's all of the railroads, it's the Port of Portland, it's the airport, it's the Columbia River and the Willamette River. I mean, all of those things come together in my district. Transportation's a big issue, not just for how you get around in my district, but how you get things to market and how you travel through my district from the rest of the state. So that's part of how I look at this.
Your district is the heart of the city.
Well,
it's where I grew up, and my grandparents bought a first house. I mean, this is the 70s and the 60s and the 50s, but I've always felt like that district. I mean, of course, people say downtown is the heart, but I really feel like North Portland, Northeast, St. John's, all the way to probably, I would say, like 30th and Killingsworth, that area. I feel like that is like our heart. MLK to Broadway.
Well, I'm not going to disagree with you on that. Rob Nose will probably get upset with me for saying that.
Sorry,
but
sorry to my district.
Yeah, but no, I agree with you. I think that that's part of the whole piece of it. Is the heart of the district. Actually, the District 43, the House District, we called it the soul of Portland. Mm-hmm. There were each district often has a particular moniker that people get up when they stand up and they say this. The person from the Christmas Tree District, which is Silverton area, or the whatever, and mine was the soul of Portland. That at that time. Now, I think that that's the case. I think that we really have a basic set of things there that you don't necessarily have in downtown. There are several. Jennifer Williamson and Mitch Greenlick might be upset with me for saying that kind of thing, but I think that's the case. But we do have. It's an important district. Truly
and a
an
district that
important
has changed dramatically over the years.
Absolutely.
I mean, I remember my first apartment was over there. I think I paid $395 for a two-bedroom.
Two-bedroom, wow.
Yeah, two-bedroom, one bath.
Wow.
Yeah.
No, I had an apartment in 14th and Tillamook. 14th and Thompson, actually, just two rows down. I had an apartment there for $45 a month. That was way back in 76, 75.
I mean, mine was
76.
the early 90s, so.
Yeah, no. So
91.
It was, but those are the kinds of things. And now that's one of the big issues. You actually admit one of the big issues is housing.
Oh.
And the cost.
We could talk about that forever and ever.
The cost of housing, the cost of, what kind of affordable housing is available, what affordable housing really means, who's building and who's not, how people are, the rent, how people are being dealt with in terms of rental issues. All of those things are just, huge issues that we did not resolve. We did do some things that were moving along to help, but nothing that we can be particularly proud of getting something accomplished in some ways. We needed to do a whole lot more, and we didn't. So that's one of the issues that I've been dealing with quite a bit. No cause evictions and the incredible ability to go in and double the rent just whenever you want. For the most part, that's just simply not okay.
Yeah. So we could go on with more issues, but I want to be very conscious of your time.
Well, thank you.
So I want you to come back. Will you promise to come back?
Absolutely.
And if people need to get a hold of you?
503-986-1722. That's my office in Salem. Probably the best number to get. My chief of staff, Troy Duker, is very good about taking a look at those numbers. Look and checking that phone, that voicemail, and then he sends me emails and tells me, okay, you need to call this person, and there's usually a list. So that's the best one. 503-986-1722, Or you can email me at sen.loufredrick@oregonlegislature.gov. So that's sen.loufredrick@oregonlegislature.gov.
Because I'd really like you to come back on and really talk about more about what happened in the 80s and the 90s and how you got to there. And then also, one of the things that I don't think people realize is that you have a job on top of being a state senator.
All right, let's put it this way. I try to make some money. I'm not sure that I'm making very much money in terms of the job. That's one of the issues. I mean, really, officially, the Senate is officially a part-time situation, but it's a part-time situation I'm probably spending 40 to 50 hours a week on. And so I have to try to find other ways to do, and it does not pay anything.
Yes. You and my husband have a lot in common because being with the Oregon National Guard, exact same thing. He's probably working 30 hours a week, but he is only getting paid for 3 days a week or a month kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Lou.
Absolutely. Glad to do it.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. I promise to have Lou back on. Have a wonderful and beautiful day. Find Your Tribe podcast is a conversation with guests addressing all aspects of what makes our businesses and personal lives unique. We will balance traditions with new methods, respecting the past while acknowledging the need to embrace new methods and technologies. Finding Your Tribe podcast uncovers the personalities behind the businesses, the leaders who paved the way, and the essential heart of what makes our tribes run. Please visit me at annieweller.com for more information.